Hello and welcome to another edition of SPS Spotlight. I'm your host, Azell Cavaan, Chief Communications Officer for Springfield Public Schools. And today on our show, we will be talking about reading, writing, and math. We will be joined by two SPS administrators who work in each of those departments. We're going to start off our interview talking about one of my favorite subjects, reading and writing. So please welcome Laura Mendes with us here today. She is the Director of Literacy for Elementary and Early Childhood for Springfield Public Schools. So Laura, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
I see you brought some props, and we will get into that a little bit later. So your title tells me that you deal with the early grades, early childhood and elementary, and the fundamentals, making sure that those students in those grades are getting the fundamentals in terms of learning how to read and learning how to write.
That is correct. Pre-K to 5.
Okay.
With some collaboration in the community around some of the ages before preschool as well.
Because it's so important,
It's so
right?
important.
There's so much early on in a toddler's life even that families could be doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit earlier. But I first want to ask you, why did you sort of get into this line of work? And I'm curious because English was always my favorite subject. My background is journalism, so I obviously love to write, so it's one of the things that I love. So what was it for you that brought you into this field?
So interestingly, I did not go to college right out of high school, and I was a young stay-at-home mom, and I played a lot of school with my kids and the kids in the neighborhood, and I was a parent volunteer in Springfield Public Schools, and I developed a love for the read aloud, perhaps first, and then being a part of teaching my own children how to appreciate reading and writing. And then I became a paraprofessional in the early 90s, and every assignment I had always pushed me into helping children learn to read. Learned a lot from working with some great teachers, and so I myself became a teacher and then a literacy coach. And now I find myself leading the work of teaching and learning around literacy in the district, which I feel like I've come full circle because my grandchildren now attend school in Springfield Public Schools. My adult children are teachers in Springfield Public Schools.
Oh, wow, you really have.
I really have.
Yes.
One's leading math, and you'll learn a little bit more about math, and one's leading physical education. But I think what we'll see today is that it all comes together, especially in the early years.
You know, I can't even remember learning how to read.
Yeah.
What are sort of the, how does a young person learn how to read?
There's a lot of variables in that, and some of them start with at home around early language and maybe playfulness and movement. Those are the things we don't think about as making us literate, but children need to be moving, they need to be playing, they need to be talking and listening and speaking about their experiences. And often they may include books or they may not include books. The more they can include books, that's terrific. Reading aloud at home is one of the best activities a family can do to help their children. And then when they come to school, our educators are well trained, and really that mechanical piece, what we call decoding, teaching them how to read.
Right.
But we're always reading to learn something new. We're building knowledge, even when they're very little and young. And so we think about that even when we're talking with our children. We want to point out, you go to McDonald's and you see the letter M, and it's displayed very differently than the letter M at Macy's, and then it's displayed very differently in a book. And you're drawing your attention to those print variables for children, and it's very simple, just making a part of life.
So it really does seem like there are so many ways that you can sneak it in as a parent, just by talking about the world around you with your child. Now, you did mention the importance of reading to kids at home. Is there a magic age that a parent should wait for before they start to read to their kid?
The sooner the better. There's research out there as soon as they're born. There's some folks that say while they're inside the mother. But certainly as soon as they're born. There's board books. You could go to the library, and they're well equipped to show people what books are available.
You mentioned the library.
Yes.
They are treasures in our city. We have some very beautiful libraries.
They really
in fact,
are.
a new library just opened on Surrey Road. It's gorgeous, right next to Dryden School.
That's right.
And they're really great resources. How should a parent use a library?
So yes, that library is gorgeous. And then when you think about it, Springfield's very lucky. We have libraries in just about every neighborhood, within walking distance, certainly within the bus line distance. And those librarians, whether they're working in the adult section or the children's section, are so well equipped to help children and families find books. It's not about their reading level when they go to the library. It's about what interests those kids. You want to hook them, right? I have books here that
Let's talk about some of the books you have
my
here.
grandchildren read these books.
So these are from your personal collection?
These are my personal library at home.
Okay.
And you don't have to buy books. Of course, it's lovely to have books in the home, but the library will provide you with books as often as you can get there. And a whole bookshelf of books is just a wonderful thing for children to have access to. This particular book, it's called the Hello Goodbye Window, and I always gravitated towards it with my own children. This is actually from when my children were younger.
That's wonderful.
And it reminded me of when I visited my grandparents, and it reminded them of when they visited their grandparents, and I'm hoping it reminds my grandsons when they visit me.
When they come to visit you. Excellent.
And then when you're looking for books, you want to find books that your children can identify with. Do the characters look like you? Do they have the same experiences as you? And then you might also want to consider books where the people, maybe they don't look like you, but the experiences are the same and that you're learning lessons. It's so valuable to learn about yourself, your own identity, your own background, your own culture, but also the backgrounds and cultures of others.
Now, what if you're a parent who is not so great at reading yourself, or maybe English isn't your first language? You might feel like there's really not much that you can do to help your child. Is that true?
That's not true. There's lots you can do. And the first thing is really that art of conversation. We talk about conversational turns, and as you notice, you asked me questions and I answered, and then you followed up. It can be as simple as, how was your day today? And then you tell me, probably the cliche teenager answer would be,
all right, good.
Well, what made it good today, Azell? And I'm pushing you to give me more answers. I'm not letting you off the hook. And then oral traditions. We all have stories in our lives. Maybe visiting your grandparents, and you're sharing those stories with your children, and you're asking them to share their stories with you. So there's a lot to be said for the oral traditions, or having children read books to you. And I think about this picture book here. It has one word in it, Azell. It's the word dude. And it's portrayed in this.
I already love that book.
It's a great book. And I read it with my grandsons, and every time the story just takes on a different twist, and that's okay. Picture books are meant to do that with us.
Excellent.
So.
What about, I remember when I used to read to my son when he was very little. Like I said, I love to read, so it's just been a part. We have books all over our house. And there would be there was like 3 books in particular that he would always want me to go back to, and we're reading the same books over and over again. And I'd be pushing to read, there's so many classics out there for kids' books, and then there's so many great new books too. So what if there's like a particular book that your child just keeps wanting you to read? Do you keep going back to that one?
Yes, you do. And I have to share a little story. I was reading a series of books by this author. I think he's out of England. Steve Antony is his name, and he has a series based on this panda character, and he's teaching manners in these books. And it's so exaggerated and exciting, and my little guys made me read those books over and over, and I'm telling you, hundreds of times.
They love it.
And they love it, but you're building vocabulary, and you're also building relationships when you do that. There's something very heartwarming about having a child on your lap or next to you, reading together.
So we mentioned the library, right? So let's just say it's a rainy day, you can't get to the library for some reason. Are there any other resources that parents can go to at home to help?
I'm glad you asked, because our Springfield students are really lucky. The district made an investment in an online product called Scholastic Literacy Pro. So our K-5 students, when they're home, they can log on through the student application page on our district website.
Okay.
And this software is pretty amazing. There's thousands of titles, and some of the books you might even see here on this table are available to students. And it matches their interest to books, it matches their reading level to books, so that they're really finding things they're interested in. Could be nonfiction, something about the world, could be a great story. Beautiful books that are in digital form.
So tell us again, how would if I'm a parent listening, how do I find this for my child?
So you go to our district website page for parents,
which is www.springfieldpublicschools.com.
Thank you.
Click on the Parents tab.
You click on, and then you follow the student applications page. And when students go into that page, you'll actually see all of the different applications that students have access to while they're at home. There are other tools as well. This one will be either alphabetically listed, and this one is Scholastic Literacy Pro, and they would just log in as they do in their class.
So that's what they look for, Scholastic Literacy Pro.
That's right.
Excellent. So reading is obviously something, once you learn how to read, you just continue doing it your whole life. So I have to ask you, is there a book that you're reading right now? I
am reading a fascinating book called The Knowledge Gap, and it's written by a woman who's been studying education. And it's a challenging read because she criticizes education in some places, and she highlights some of the things that we do well. But what she really brings to attention is that our job is to build knowledge. So when you think about some of the things that we've been talking about, those experiences that children have, we really are trying to build knowledge through those experiences. So when you go to the park, you're talking about the trees and the birds. So when they go to the library and they develop an interest in birds, they're getting books on birds. And you're tired of having bird books in your house, but they're learning, they're building knowledge. So for me, it came full circle with the adult read that I'm reading right now. Absolutely, absolutely. But it does say you kind of let the kids lead in their natural, let their natural interests sort of lead them towards books that they're drawn to. That's right. Sometimes we have to read things because we have to read them, but we really want to balance that with, we read for fun, we read for enjoyment, our own personal knowledge and gains. Yeah, I love to read for fun. I always have a book that I'm reading in the evenings, just even if it's for 20 minutes. Just something fun. It's a great way to relax, and it does transport you out of your regular everyday existence into some other different world. If you're reading something outside of work, like your reading is work related right now. Outside of work, I'm often reading these picture books, but you mentioned 20 minutes, and that's really all that's needed a night. Is if children just read 20 minutes at night at home, they'd really be exercising that reading brain. Excellent. The key is find a book they love. Find a book they love, find a friend they love to read with, or a family member, and it's all good. Excellent. Well, thanks, Laura, for being here with us. Thank you. We really appreciate the tips that you gave us, and it's just a reminder that it doesn't have to be something that's difficult or a chore or challenging even for parents. It could be really fun to help your child learn about the world around them just through conversation, and then having them identify stuff that they're naturally interested in and finding books in the library for free to help them to learn how to read. Thank you. Excellent. Thanks for being with us. Now stay tuned. We're going to learn a little bit more about math. And thank you for sticking with us. We just talked about reading and writing, and now we're going to talk about arithmetic. I am joined by the math supervisor of Springfield Public Schools. Her name is Dr. Deatrice Johnson. Thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And as a supervisor of math, you work with math teachers who are in the classrooms working with our students.
Yes, right? I work with the math teachers. I also work with the instructional coaches that work alongside of the math teachers in the various buildings.
Okay, excellent. So let's just talk about math. It is a favorite subject for so many students. I know that students who usually like math also like science. So math and science are favorites for a lot of students out there. And a lot of the time we hear students talking about how they learned math early. Like the ones who really love it, they just have a love for numbers. So I guess if we're talking with parents who have young ones and we want them to instill a love of math in them early, what are some of the things that they could do while the kids are really still small to start getting them some like familiarity or comfort around numbers?
One of the things that I would recommend is making math fun for their kids at home. They want to expose their kids to games, make it family time, but not just games that focus on the computation, but games that focus on building their confidence, having them solve different puzzles that would build their
level of comfort around numbers. So when you say computation, like don't focus on computation, what does that mean?
Well, we should avoid just having the kids focus on just memorization and just procedures, just focusing on the algorithms. We want them to be focusing on problems, like that they need to solve that's connected to real life. So using examples that relate to the kids' world. So, maybe, something that has to do with, a television show that they watch or something, but just making math real for them and allowing them to work through the problems.
So what comes to mind for me is Candyland, because I love playing that, and I still love playing that with little kids, Candyland. And so sometimes maybe if you count like, okay, you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to get to this color. Wow, you didn't really have to go that far when you only had to go 1 space. Look how much bigger 4 is than 1. So rather than going like 1 + 3 = 4. Is that kind of the concept?
That works. Also just finding like little toys and things so they can understand, have that conceptual understanding. So what does 10 really look like? And what is 10 composed of? So knowing that 10 toys represents the number 10. So not just understanding how to count to 10, but also knowing what that looks like.
Right.
We find that a lot of our older students, because they didn't get that number sense when they were younger, they really have more difficulty with the higher level math.
Okay.
So
that seems
just
like a really
building
simple
that number sense is critical.
Okay. Well, that seems like something that's fun and easy to do. I mean, even when you're at home cooking dinner or you're out on the streets or something like that, you could always just sort of show groups of items and count them, and then kids will get a sense of how big 8 is compared to how small 2 is.
One of the things that we're doing in our elementary schools, we're actually have had training for our elementary ILSs, our coaches, our math coaches, in a program called Math Recovery. And it does just that. It helps to build the number sense and the conceptual understanding for those kids in the early years, because when they get to the higher level grades, they sometimes fall apart because they don't understand how numbers work. So Math Recovery, our coaches are being trained, and they're actually, your parents, some of the students, your children might be in a program that involves working with the kids at this level.
Excellent. Now, what if you're a parent and you had a hard time with math in school, and so your child comes to you with their math homework, and you immediately become that, 5th grader who's daunted by math again. How should parents who have a hard time with math themselves react when their students come home and ask them for help?
Wow. I've gotten a lot of phone calls from parents in that same situation. They are, how are you smarter than a 5th grader? They're saying, I'm not smarter than a 1st grader because I don't understand the math. It's not done the way that they learned it, so they are confused. So I would first advise the parents not to share your anxiety about math with your children. Too often parents say, I can't do math, I'm not good at math, and students believe that that's an innate characteristic, so they will come and say, well, my family is not good at math, so that's just not something that I'm going to be good at.
So break that cycle.
We definitely want to break that cycle.
Okay.
Yes.
That right there is great advice,
Yes.
because I think your natural inclination would be like, I was never great at math, I don't know. But you just don't even want to do that. So
Right.
how can a parent actually do the opposite and encourage their student?
So we want parents to support teachers in creating problem solvers. We don't want we're not trying to create our students to be computers, because we
Right.
don't need that. We need our students to be able to face any type of problem and use problem-solving skills. So in order to do that, we need to allow them to have that productive struggle. And so we want parents to expose the kids to the activities, even the homework that they're getting, and allow them to have that productive struggle and to work through the problems with you in in the way that it's intended and not going back to those algorithms that they learned.
So resist the urge to say, well, this is the way I learned it in school.
Absolutely.
Instead, you want to say, well, show me how much you do know. Show me how far you can go.
Right.
And talk the child through it that way.
Absolutely.
And allow them to understand it's okay to take some time to learn a concept.
Correct.
Excellent.
Yes.
Now let's talk a little bit about your love for math and becoming an educator. How did you find yourself in this field?
So I actually, I believe my influence was based on the teachers that I had. So I grew up in Springfield, and I actually loved some of my teachers in front of me. From early on, I used to play school in my neighborhood, and I was the teacher. But I think I didn't really believe it was possible for me until I saw people teaching that looked like me. So in front of me, you know, I needed to see people that looked like me to make it seem like it's something that I can do.
For you.
Yes.
Right. And then you went on to college, you have a doctorate's degree, and now you are in working with math teachers, you're not really in front of students anymore, but certainly they, you do brush elbows with them and you see students. Do you feel it's an important part of what you do to be exposed to students who can see people like you and me in positions that, have to do with math and education?
I think it's very important. I believe that if I had not seen people in the position, that I probably would have never gotten into the education field. I'm not teaching in the classroom anymore, but I'm in the schools daily, and I do see the students' reaction just when I come into the room, like students of color, and they look to me, in a certain way that I think it's, important that they see people who look like them.
Good. Well, Dr. Johnson, thank you for being with us and talking with us about math and kind of demystifying the role that parents can play with their youngsters from a very early age to make them comfortable around numbers. And then as they get older and maybe their math lessons surpass what we remember from school, not to impress any anxiety upon our students, but to encourage them to show us what they do know and continue to work with their teachers, and to understand that sometimes it takes a little bit of time before you learn these things. And of course, for our math scholars and our math wizards out there, I mean, the future is so bright because math is all around us. We use math all day, every day, whether we realize it or not.
Yes.
So, excellent. Well, thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for sticking with us. I hope you learned a little bit about what is going on in Springfield Public Schools behind reading, writing, and arithmetic. We spoke with just 2 people today who help us to make sure that our kids learn all that they can learn in all those areas. Again, my name is Azell Cavaan. I'm Chief Communications Officer, and thank you for watching another episode of SPS Spotlight.